If data is the foundation for all AI initiatives, does your company have the right data in place? Is it accurate, accessible, and maybe more importantly, secure? What other questions should executives be asking of their technology leaders to ensure their data foundation is in place for this transformational moment? Hi, I'm Courtney Baker, and this is AI Knowhow from Knownwell, helping you reimagine your business in the AI era. As always, I'm joined by Knownwell CEO David DeWolf, Chief Strategy Officer Pete Buer, and Chief Product Officer Mohan Rao. We also have a Q&A with Mitesh Mangaonkar, a tech lead in software engineering at Airbnb, who has some great advice for how executives should be thinking about preparing their data to get the most out of AI. But first, the news. Pete Buer joins us as always to break down some of the latest AI headlines and how they apply to your business. Hey, Pete, how are you?
Good, Courtney. How are you doing?
I'm doing good. Thanks, Pete. Our first story this week comes from Technically. AI bots are helping dispatchers with their workload. Here's the gist of it. 911 call centers in 7 states are using or testing AI. They currently handle or route non-emergency calls so that emergency calls can get through to an operator more quickly. Charleston, South Carolina is using Amazon Connect to route non-emergency callers to the appropriate resources and has seen, this is big here, 36% decrease in non-emergency 911 calls since March. Pete, what lessons do you take away from this for business leaders?
We're having so many conversations with customers who are, especially in the services realm, wrestling with this exact issue. And I think the allegory feeds directly to guidance for how executives should think about managing the business. So there's kind of a 2-step dance in the game of making services more efficient. First step is help your people become more productive, better able to handle the flow of service requests. And then secondly, turn service over to customers themselves. Let them get the guidance that they need in a self-serve basis on the timing that they need. And basically at the end of the day, take these high emergency, fallen tree requests off of the plate of your valuable service providers and elevate them to a higher level of gain. So it works perfect.
Isn't it interesting? We almost have a theme here with our In the News. We've had a city or urban usage of the tool quite frequently. These very, physical things of, hey, how do we get an emergency vehicle to the right person more quickly? How do we have stoplights make us wait less time? It's interesting how it seems to really be impacting our physical world in a really good way.
I will say we're a little cavalier about the way we talk about these things sometimes too. It has the feeling of, wave your magic wand and change your business model entirely. And I should mention this is, of course, a process that requires cost and investment and change management. And just a mention of a podcast episode that we have coming up. Aisha Armstrong, CEO of Vecteris and author of the book Productize, is going to help us understand at a deeper level how companies go through this process to transform. And so I encourage listeners to join in on that one.
Oh, yes. I'm excited about that. Okay, our next piece is from the New York Post. AI can detect diabetes just by listening to you talk for 10 seconds. Mega mic drop there. I can barely understand that. This study was published on the Mayo Clinic's digital health site, and they found that AI has a nearly 90% success rate at determining whether a patient has type 2 diabetes just by listening to 6 to 10 seconds of audio. According to the article, signal processing technologies were able to perceive certain notes of vocal pitch that do not register with a human ear. Pete, can you break this one down for us? I am just blown away here.
Yeah, set aside the potential impact on humanity 6 seconds to start addressing one of the largest health problems facing the country, the world. Like, goodness gracious. But if I funnel that down to how to think about it in the context of leading businesses, similar process, right? Like, think about what your customers' biggest problems are, and ask yourself whether AI, machine learning, digitization, even process change can help make some sort of fundamental difference for them. And then physician, heal thyself, right? Apply the same thinking to your own business. What are your biggest operational challenges, data challenges, and how might AI be a prescription for addressing that? All the better if you can not just change the economics of your business and deliver more value to customers, but make the world a healthier place.
Yeah, and on that note, I just want to share a few stats around this because it does have an actual, obviously, the health of humanity, but also an economic impact. So the Mayo Clinic abstract has these stats. An estimated 175 million people worldwide have undiagnosed diabetes, which will represent a cumulative economic burden of $2.1 trillion per year by 2030.
Amazing.
Pete, always good to have you. Thanks for being here with us.
Thank you. Love being here.
I sat down with Knownwell CEO David DeWolf and CPO Mohan Rao to talk about why having the right data foundation in place is necessary for companies to get the most out of AI. If you're a CEO who's learning about how AI will impact your business, or an executive who's responsible for data or leveraging AI, you won't want to miss this. David, Mohan, welcome back to the show.
We're thrilled to be here. Glad the fly is swimming around your room as well.
Yeah, everybody. There's a fly in my office. It's a problem. Mohan has named it. What did you name it?
A data bug.
A data bug. Oh, that's a perfect transition to talk about what we're going to talk about today. If you don't know, we actually have a proprietary assessment to help you really determine what your readiness is to apply AI to your company. And one of the areas that we specifically have questions around is your company's data foundation. So I've heard both of you, as you've engaged with executives, say things like, we can't even really get to AI yet. We know we need to, we want to be there, but we can't yet because we don't have our data or our technology in place. So I want to have a conversation about that because that's something we're hearing. And my concern is if we let that obstacle continue to just sit there, we get down the road, and by we, I mean all of you listening, all of the great companies that are listening, get down the road and you're so far behind getting started in this AI application that you actually can't catch up to your competitors any longer. The curve to get there is too big. So let's jump in. Let's talk about data foundations. What do you think people mean when they're saying that to you? Where do you think they are? And where do you think they need to get to?
Let me start kind of conceptually, and then Mohan, maybe you can move us practically here. I would say here's what I hear over and over is that when it comes to AI, executives believe this is a data and technology problem. And you mentioned the assessment, Courtney. The purpose of the assessment for us is to actually broaden the purview on that and say, listen, it's not just a data and a technology problem. So I do think there are things that executives can do to move forward in the other areas that we lay out there. But I do also think it's critical that we talk about the data and the technology and that data foundation that you're referring to. So let's not ignore that, right? We talk about the other a lot on this podcast. This time around, we want to talk about that data foundation. And I'll actually double down with you, Courtney, and ask Mohan a question, because I have a fear as a technologist that saw the value of moving to software development driven by real use cases, real stories, building steel thread functionality versus just infrastructure layers. in this AI world, what I'm hearing is a lot of technologists talking about, well, my data's not ready. My data foundation's not ready. My technology stack just isn't there to be able to start to use AI. And I want to scream, hey, let's find one use case and solve for it versus boiling the infrastructure ocean first. How would you respond to that? And what do you advise executives that may not know how to probe at that question to figure out if we're doing this the smart way or not?
I think the biggest mistake that companies make is to make this a technology only problem, right? So you got to kind of come at this in multiple ways here. The technology infrastructure is important. We all know that because, you can't have siloed data. You need to bring them together. But also there is two other important work that can start right away. One is around looking at the data you have, identifying it, prioritizing it, and figuring out what your proprietary data assets are that truly makes you unique, that you can offer a compelling service to your customers. So you can start that analysis work and from one direction. And the other direction is to look at your strategy and make this a strategy-driven process. How can AI augment your existing strategy into a new baseline strategic decisions that you've made? How can you be continuously prioritizing your projects that aid that strategy? How can you be successfully managing these projects? These product management, project management intersection type things are super important as you're investing in a modern data stack.
Mohan, I want to go back to the first of identifying that unique data, because you and I had a really interesting conversation about this actually a couple of weeks ago, because a lot of times people hear the word proprietary data and they're starting to think about their own unique data that nobody else has. But I think about some of the most valuable companies in the world. Take, for example, I love the example of Carfax, right? Carfax and the vehicle history report is an amalgamation of thousands of publicly available data sources, right? And it is through the integration of that and the making sense of it that they have created a very unique, differentiated offering with, frankly, a huge moat around it. So it doesn't have to be proprietary. How should executives be thinking about that when you frame that proprietary data? Where are the different places that you can find that?
Yeah, I think what makes it proprietary is the combination of the data that exists, right? So you can uniquely combine data make it into a proprietary data set. So that is a huge value. It's really kind of combining and putting them in the right places, looking at adjacencies that allows you to make a better decision at the end of the day, or your customers to make better decision. That is definitely a place to start. But there is also a lot of latent data in an enterprise, right? So there are Google Docs, there are emails, there are transcripts available from Zoom sessions. These are all data that are untapped today that obviously you need to keep privacy in mind when you do it. But there's a huge amount of data that everybody has that's proprietary, but they think of proprietary as unique, that only they have, and it's something truly special. That's not what we're talking about here. We're talking about combinations as well as data that already exists that you're not tapping into.
There's a shift that you just implied that I think is really important to call out and be explicit about, which is historically when we've thought about data, I think executives have thought about discrete data items in a database that is labeled rational data, right? Now we're talking about information flows. And I love to talk about the natural organic information flows of a business. You just talked about it. Meeting notes, documents, right? Conversations are actually data we can do something with, because what is different about AI from the software technology stacks we've had in the past is the ability to process this unstructured data, this information, and infer judgments on it versus just look up straight values and do math off of it, right? That's the fundamental difference with AI.
I love this conversation. And yet I still, if I'm in the executive listening right now, maybe I'm the COO or some other non-technologist seat, I'm still wondering, okay, what are the things I need to get in place? I hear you. I want that. Give it to me today. How do I get there?
I think the key here is going to be to figure out identifying the data that you have, like we've been talking about, and not make it into an infrastructure problem right away, right? So most people would think of it as, Courtney, I need to go spend $2 million on your favorite modern data stack, right? Whatever that may be, right? And you could also get locked in into that ecosystem at a very early stage here in the cycle. So while those will be important at some point, that is not necessarily step one. Step one is to look at the strategy, look at what is it that you want to get out of the whole initiative, right? It could be operational efficiencies, in which case you have to figure out what is the data that really matters here, and where are those pockets of data, what data has not been captured yet that you should capture, and then move it in, then start thinking about the technology stack and the data pipelines and the data lake, and all of those things are super important. I'm not saying those are not important, but it doesn't have to be problem number one to solve. It is one among the many other problems you got to look at.
That's really helpful. I am also wondering, I had the privilege of listening in on the interview that we're going to have later in this episode. And Mitesh he's the lead data scientist at Airbnb, very sharp. And I found myself, as I was listening, I was like, if I was one of his peers, I wouldn't even know what I didn't know. I wouldn't even know how to ask the questions to get at what I was really wanting to know. And I have this inkling as we continue in pursuit of leveraging AI that it's going to become more and more important for all executives to have better understanding about our data foundations. So can you help us? Like, what are the questions that might be helpful to start asking?
I think you just talked about a trend that's been going on for a while, actually.
Yeah.
I think the job of an executive has become more and more data oriented over time. And we are about to see a huge inflection point where that just exponentially becomes more and more important. And if you look at the research shows that executives don't tend to trust it, right? They're afraid to make decisions off of data because it's something that's beyond them. So the first thing is, I think, to actually be aware of what you just said, how critical it is that we operate off of data as executives. I think the second thing is a point that Mohan talked about, which is right now, especially in the middle market, we see organizations investing heavily in data platforms and trying to solve this data silo problem. I'm actually not convinced that, especially in the middle market, we need to solve that problem right now. Yes, there is all sorts of potential if we can have a single view of the data and we can make sense of it and we can integrate it together. But I think we're very quickly skipping the point where every single organization needs to do that themselves. It reminds me very much of the advent of some of the web technologies that very quickly we skipped over and we had cloud, where now we're not building our own infrastructure. We're actually leveraging Amazon and Microsoft for the cloud infrastructure as opposed to buying our own boxes and hardware. And I really think that platform concept is going to come about as a middleware layer here in businesses, where we're going to be able to rely on insight platforms for the model aspect of what we're doing and not have to actually do that work ourselves. And so there are organizations maybe that really will differentiate by having their own insights, but the vast majority of companies will rely on somebody else. And so the third piece of that, I think, then gets to your question of what can executives do? I think you have to start to educate yourself.
And one way to think about this shift is you can have partner platforms on which you can run your data. So what this does is it changes, in technology, we call it ETL. You extract the data, you transform, you load it. The ETL paradigm changes to ELT, which is you extract, you load into the platform, but the transformation happens in the cloud, as David said, or in a partner cloud, or whatever it is. So essentially, you don't have to think about how do I get all the de-siloing happen at step one, and you can make that happen later on through the whole ELT change that's going on here.
David, Mohan, I think that was really helpful in understanding data foundations. If you haven't already, make sure to go check out our readiness assessment. You can take the full assessment at knownwell.com. Mohan, David, thank you.
Thanks, Courtney. Thanks, David.
If you're listening to this podcast, most likely you're pretty interested in figuring out what AI means for your business. But as we've talked to more and more executives, we hear over and over again that it's hard to figure out where to start. Well, that's exactly why we created a brand new assessment to help you get a clearer picture on where your organization stands today and the areas that it needs to get right foundationally to really be able to leverage AI in your business. You can take that quick assessment on our website at knownwell.com. This week, Pete Buer talked with Mitesh Mangaonkar from Airbnb. Mitesh is an engineering leader pioneering the use of generative AI to transform data platforms. He's an influential voice shaping the future of data engineering and governance. And from sitting in on his chat with Pete, I can totally see why.
Mitesh, we're so excited to have you on the show. Welcome.
Thank you, Pete. I'm truly excited to be on your show today.
We have built at Knownwell a readiness assessment to help companies that are sort of at the front end of the AI and data journey figure out kind of what's the work they need to do in what order. One of the key pillars of that work is having your data strategy and foundation properly established. And I know that's something that's near and dear to your heart. What do you see as the cornerstones of a killer data foundation?
Yeah, first of all, I'll say that's definitely a great initiative. I love that you guys are thinking about data as the foundation for an AI initiative that any company wants to build. So I believe, every company that wants to transform their core business model definitely needs AI. And then it's also important to understand that successfully integrating AI is not a small feat, and it requires a certain level of organizational preparedness and kind of commitment. So that's where having a robust data foundation is pivotal. So when I think about what are the cornerstones on the data foundation, the first and foremost that comes to my mind is data quality and integrity of the data. So think of it, I cannot emphasize enough how much important that is. Being an AI system, if it needs to function effectively, it needs to be clean. It needs to be fed with clean data, clear data, reliable data. So specifically at Airbnb, we have built rigorous ETL processes to ensure that whatever data we are processing, we are feeding into any of the downstream system, be it machine learning, AI system, it needs to have accurate data. There cannot be second thoughts on the quality of the data. So that is first one. Second one definitely is going to be on the data governance and management. So the way I think about it is every company should implement some kind of a data framework. I know there are a lot of data frameworks out there, but then I believe it should be most of a custom built data governance framework that depends on the way your company or your business is structured. So based on your size, you might not need an enterprise grade data governance framework, but then you definitely should see what's out there and then pick what is customizable and fits the need of your business. So that is the second one for me. Another one that comes to my mind is data accessibility. So with the ever-growing amount of data, you might imagine that there's so much of data lying in different data storages, data platforms within the same company. So for my company, so we have been experiencing a problem because of this data fragmentation, right? So one of the problem is data discoverability. Because you have so much of data, how do you where do you know where's the data that I want is? Another one, it's gonna be data privacy and security. So with GDPR, CCPA, and other privacy regulation, it is essential that we ensure the data privacy of the data that we are collecting from our customers, making sure we are applying the right policies and regulations, and also thinking in the paradigm of AI, you should use certain privacy enhancing or privacy ensuring technologies so that we are not leaking any sensitive data into our AI system. So that way it's going to be important to preserve the privacy of your data. Then a last one that comes to my mind is around a scalable data infrastructure. So most of the big data technologies and modern data stack have been a game changer for us, like all the tech companies or even like non-tech companies. So allowing a seamless processing of those massive volume of data that you're collecting is going to be a foundational for any kind of AI initiative that you're building to empower your company's business.
And I guess, is there a step zero that's about strategy in the first place? There are so many sources of amazing data that you could be making sense of. Do you boil the ocean? Do you pick something small and get rolling?
I think, we can back up a little bit there. So even before we think of, all this data quality or like even the data governance, I think at the leadership level, right, you need to be thinking of what's the vision of my company? Like where am I going to take my company in the next, let's break it down into like short term, could be 1 year, 3 years, 5 years. And then actually working backward from, okay, if I want to achieve this goal in 1 year, is data a core requirement for my business? Definitely, I believe 99.9% of the time, the answer is going to be yes, I need some kind of core data that maybe I don't have right now. So that's when you got to think like, what sort of non-existing data sources or like not log data sources, I want to call them, that my business is not using, but is actually essential for my business going forward. So I would think of it from like the perspective of the AI initiatives that you're thinking of, what data it is going to need, what do I have now, where is the gap, is what I would do. Another would be around definitely thinking from the data privacy, security, governance. So what frameworks do I have within my company? Like, can I purchase? So if there's always going to be that question about buy or build or buy, right? So how feasible it is for my existing team or like the company to actually build something within that 1 year? Is that something I want to invest in? The leader should think of, can that be more or less a buy kind of a decision? So there has to be like that strategy that every leader, data leader, analytics leader should be thinking of when they want to use the data as the foundation for any AI initiative.
Mitesh, thank you. It's been a pleasure. Appreciate your time and enjoyed going deep with you on all things data and AI.
Thank you so much, Pete. It was really amazing to talk with you and learn about how your company is also using AI and how are you helping other companies leverage AI. Thank you so much.
That's it for today's episode of the show. Thanks as always for listening. And by the way, did you know you can also watch our show? Don't forget to rate and review the show wherever you listen. It actually means a lot to us. Also, want to remind you that there is a free assessment at knownwell.com where you can go right now to find out how prepared your organization is to meet the moment with AI. Answer 30 questions and you'll get customized analysis of where your company stands today and where you need to go to build a foundation that can leverage AI. Before we go, normally we like to ask ChatGPT what it thinks about this week's topic. But to mix it up, we're actually going to get Bard's opinion on today's topic. So Bard, what do you think about building the data foundation for AI?
Businesses building the data foundation for AI are investing in their future. By creating a solid foundation of clean, accessible, and secure data, businesses are positioning themselves to succeed in the age of AI.
Now you're in the know. We'll see you next week with more AI news, roundtable discussions, and interviews.